when we begin to know what we really are, have some experience, it could be just a momentary flash. It could be something that's quite immense and sustained. But whatever it is, when we begin to know through one's experience that we are this consciousness, this presence of unconditioned consciousness. When we begin to know that that's really the truth of who we are, of what we are, then we're no longer at the mercy of this energy of unsatisfactoriness. It may arise within you at times, under certain situations, because that's what tends to happen. You go into places that are more challenging, right? Into the world of human beings, that most of them are caught in this density, right? And so they'll be living it out. And it can be triggered in you, right? It gets triggered. All of a sudden, it manifests. One moment you're feeling wonderful, at peace, love, right? Just everything's great. And then something triggers that latent sort of unsatisfactoriness in you. Right? And of course, when that happens, most people immediately fall into the trance of it, which means an identification with it. But when you can just see it for what it is, just the triggering, the arising of that unsatisfactoriness, and know that it's not really who you are. It's there, you can't deny it, you can't run away from it, but it's not you. It arises within this field of unconditioned consciousness of presence. So you have some connection to the truth of your being. Then you don't get caught. You don't get hooked. And sometimes quite suddenly, more often over time, this energy sort of in you, this energy of unsatisfactoriness, gets weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker until it just dissipates. And when the recognition of you as the eternal presence gets strong enough and bright enough, then this energy field really can't live in your system anymore. When your recognition of your own, the truth of being, the truth of this pure unconditioned consciousness gets bright enough, gets obvious enough, then this energy field doesn't have anything to attach to. You're not Velcro anymore, right? It can't really pull on you. So the most powerful element in all this is your own presence. The recognition of that presence, of that pure, unconditioned consciousness. Very, very, very powerful. That's what Jesus would call the kingdom of heaven. In the Gospel of Thomas, the kingdom of heaven is spread upon the earth and men do not see it. Which means it's right here. It's not some other world. It's right here and it's right now. It's just people don't recognize it. They're stuck in this sort of very dense energy field. And awakening is getting your identity out of it. It's that sudden recognition. Oh, I am not defined by any of that. In fact, you're not defined by anything at all. That's the great joy of it. That's the good news of it. Yeah? And the more you realize your own presence of being, then you become, what can I say? Well, you become what you are, right? which is a very, what would you say? It's a healing presence in the world. You know? I remember years ago, when things were very small, and a woman who came a lot, and still does come, and she had this very, very, very dense generational energy field of deep, deep pain, right? Deep, deep, deep pain that came right down through the family line, and of course, as usually happens, her mind and ego attached to it, and she was in this very deep state of pain. And one day after I'd done a teaching, she asked if she could see me. I said, okay. And we went into this little room and we sat down, and all of a sudden it was as if she just, in front of my eyes, just transformed into like this wrathful deity. And the energy field of unsatisfactoriness and pain just completely had taken her over. Now I sensed what was coming because I could feel her energy as we walked down the hall. When she asked me if we could talk, I was kind of like, okay. I kind of, I'd been at it long enough to know what was coming. And sure enough, it was just this intense anger and rage, and we were in this little room, and she started out just by kind of, saying something. I can't remember what her mind attached to something I said, and it triggered. When we're in that state, it doesn't take much to trigger us. And this anger came out, and then it got momentum, and then it became this rage, and then it was, the voice got louder, and then it was yelling, and then it was screaming. And I was sitting in the, funny enough, I'd sat in the corner. So I was sitting on a chair in the corner. And as often happens when these kind of events happen to me, and I think other people, you may have had some of this experience too, was that I was sitting there, was this extreme intensification of presence. Okay, it was like as if somebody took the dimmer switch of presence and just turned it up to full volume. And the more angry she got, the stronger this inner sense of presence and stillness and openness got. And I just felt like I was literally just like a totally transparent, open space for her to discharge all this into. And she went on and on and on and on and on and on. And I didn't say a word. I just sat there in that state of intense, open, intense presence. And she literally probably just yelled and raged for a good 10 or 15 minutes. This continuous, unending, verbal and then quite suddenly, all of a sudden, she's saying, and all of a sudden, I felt this immediate shift in her. And it was like, she literally was like ranting and raving, and her arms were going, and all of a sudden, it was like, she kind of woke up. And it was like, and she just stopped in mid-sentence. And her arms dropped. And she just looked at me and she said, "What am I doing?" And I just said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "It was like I was caught in a dream." And all of a sudden she sat down because she had gotten up her chair. She was standing up and ranting, and she sat down in her chair. And she sat down in her chair, and she just entered into that same state of presence. And this, I only tell this story because it's the capacity everybody has within them. All of you have this capacity. It is what you really are. And it is what she really was too. And so by not reacting to what was happening by actually being, and I wasn't doing it, it just happened. It wasn't something that I did, that I took any credit for. It just happened, this intensification of presence. And all of a sudden it pulled her into her own presence. Right? And she just popped out of this dream state. And it was the first time in her life that she had really ever experienced in decades and decades what it felt like not to be caught in that generational dream. She'd lived in that dream her whole life, for decades and decades and decades. And it was the first time that she just sat there kind of stunned, not knowing what had really happened.